Hello, you're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. It's about family, connected parenting, celebrating your amazing body, connection with your community and finding your truth. Our show is coming to you from the studios of BayFM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network and globally via our podcast at pbbmedia.org.
So Zenith Virago is a long-time local and in the community, the Byron Shire community. She's a death walker, a marriage celebrant and an elder in our community and an advocate for women's rights and lifelong and proud member of the LGBTIQ community. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about her work as a death worker, but also about this eventuating phase she's moving into, becoming an elder, and has been for many, many years now, and the impact that's had on how she views life and what she sees as important, but also through her work as a death walker, how much of that has informed this journey as an elder as well, becoming an elder and the importance of elders in the community. Zenith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Annie.
We said before we're going to talk a bit about this work that you've been doing as a death walker, and as you often say, how important it is to set room at the table for death and what that means. So maybe we could start off a little bit with the relevance of death in our everyday life.
So for those that don't know, I've spent 25 years working in this community with death and dying and bereaved people. And that's been expected death and sudden death. So that's not only old people like me and like many people who'll be listening, but also young people and also children, where death has come suddenly or expectedly to them. So there is this old adage that people joke about, saying death and taxes are the only certainties in life. And I always contradict that by saying, children don't pay taxes, but they do die. And it's generally most people's worst fear that their children will die or their grandchildren will die. Now, as many of us whose children are adults, but now we have to look again at those feelings of loss in case it happens to our grandchildren. And during that journey, it's been an incredible opportunity to do that here in this community with many people who don't follow religious traditions or faiths, who are respectful of nature and its cycles and also of indigenous cultures and also other cultures throughout the world, not just the Western paradigm. And within that, we have now created a death style that is rich, and that's become very normal for lots of us in this area. And what I've seen over the last 10 years, perhaps, is other people catching up with the way we do death here, and which is really, it's not anything revolutionary, it's just a more natural approach, an accepting approach to it, and a more meaningful one when it's taken out of the hands of religion and people aren't limited by that sort of prescribed response and approach to ceremony and then to bereavement and loss. So that's the sort of background. So within that, what I see is I see people at the ceremony, then I see people at the bedside and at the kitchen table when someone is ill or someone has died. And then I see a community full of, in various stages of loss. Either someone's dying, as I said this morning already on my way here in 20 minutes, 2 people in our community, I had rich, deep conversations with them. But generally death is accompanying us all the time. It's walking alongside us. And so what I'm trying to explain to people is that, like for me, my learning has been incredible because I've had that opportunity to be with it so fully, but without the personal pain and emotional response to loss of people that I love. There have been some, but mostly it's a bigger picture for me. And so what I see is really will be useful within our, this culture that we live in Australia right now, is for people to really start to see that once they turn, 40, then every day over 40 without cancer, without a disease, you are on a good wicket. Because all of that energy is wide open to you. It's like free radical energy. You can do whatever you want. But once you get a diagnosis of something, then everything has to pull in to respond to that. And people are often ill-prepared for that. It's a shock, as it rightly can be when someone gets diagnosed with something or someone else gets diagnosed with something. But of course, really, our bodies are only capable of so much. And so what the generation of people that are my age, like I'm 62 now, but when I turned 56, I decided that I'd entered the last third of my life. I'd done, childhood and adolescence and being a young adult. And then I was in middle age, whatever that might be. But now at 56, I really see that I'm entering older age. I'm entering the last third of my life, and really I'm entering an elderhood where everything that I've learned I should be offering back, not only to my own grandchildren and my children who don't want to listen, not really, but to my community at large. And fortunately, I'm in a position with death that people are prepared to listen, because that I'm a body of experience now, and I'm carrying the experiences of being with incredibly courageous people who were dying and wanted to do that as well as they could. And so it's part of my role to offer that back to anyone who asks for it, but also to the community at large. And fortunately, again, because we've built up a structure where we have BayFM, we have the Echo, we have a range of functioning organisations, and we have events that not only me, but many other people who are carrying a lifetime of learning and the wisdom that we've gained from that are in positions to share that. And in Indigenous cultures, there's always a place for elders, and they're respected because they are carrying a lifetime's wisdom. And so you don't have to start from scratch. If you listen to the elders and to the elders, then you can weigh that up in decisions that you make. And that's been the way of the world. But most people haven't lived this long. Now we're living much longer lives because of pharmaceutical and surgical intervention, all of which is great. But some people are living too long. And, the world's full of people now who are, in aged care facilities who have lots of great things to offer, but there's no one to listen, or there's no opportunity for them. And we, as a community, are less from letting that wisdom disappear without paying attention to it, I think.
Yes.
That's a very long answer to a simple question.
It's a very great answer. And it's true. It's all true, particularly with our elders. And, I mean, one thing you said about people are living maybe too long, but I wonder if that's interwoven with the fact that they're living too long and unwell and in a disjointed society. Some of the research coming out from the Blue Zone shows people living well into their hundreds, but they're so integrated into a tight-knit community, and they're living well throughout that entire time that actually those elders, they're golden inside their communities. They're interwoven into each and every daily aspect, and they're so meaningful to the community that they have something to live for, and they keep living into a very old age. So it's whether not so much that people are living into an old age, it's the fact that we have this broken community that we don't, like you said, we don't respect our elders, and we don't have a place for them. We don't make a place for them.
Well, we have made a place for them.
Yeah, well, we've made a very bad place.
Yeah, which is a detachment, and then people go to visit or they don't. They're sitting around together, and I mean, there are some great aged care facilities, and we're lucky we have a couple in this area, but there are a lot of terrible ones where people are just plonked in there because young families having to work and there's no one to care for them, and it often falls to the women in the family who have to make a decision: do I want to care for my aged parent, or do I want to be enjoying my grandchildren? And I've had that conversation with several women where they don't want to look after that parent for whatever reason. Sometimes
But
they
we don't
do.
have those social structures set up. We have all of this. I mean, it's a bit like when you become a parent. We have all of this expectation on parents, yet we've completely removed, in the Western world at least, to a very large degree, all of the social structures that support healthy parenting, healthy aging, healthy, everybody's in the silo. Now you're a teenager, deal with it. Now you're becoming a mother, deal with it. Now you're, middle-aged, deal with it, with whatever vices, Then now you're in elderhood, deal with it. And rather than it being a natural flow of everything that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty messed up.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. I'm Annalee Atia, and on the show with me today is Zenith Virago, and we're talking about death and community and becoming an elder and elderhood in general, and how we can improve this ongoing relationship between all of us throughout all the phases of our life, and especially as we're going into our elderhood, how valuable that is for the rest of the community. So Zenith, tell me a bit more about, I'm really curious how you see elderhood now that you're moving into this phase in your life.
Well, there are two parts of it to me. One is my personal life and the other is my professional life. So as part of my professional life, what I absolutely see is that grandparents, part of their role is to teach the grandchildren what it means to die. And most children will accept, with whatever emotional response they have, that their grandparents are going to die because they're old. Everybody says they're old and they're going to die, and there's some sort of natural process in that. But what happens now is, because those grandparents are living longer, or there might be a stop-start approach where they think they're dying, but then surgery or medication may change that outcome and they live longer. But then they're often, as we say, in care. And so the children, are losing that natural understanding of how death occurs, even though they're still exposed to death of their peers or their parents. And so when the grandparents die, the parents move up and in order to take their place, and they'll probably go next. That might take years to happen. But when we were children, our grandparents died, and we learned about it that way. It was a soft in a way. But that's distorting a lot now because of the way our communities and cultures are. And years ago also, children died more in childbirth or under 5. So when people say, it's unnatural, it's not the natural order of things that children die before their parents, that's only a relatively, I have to say, at the risk of being controversial, from vaccination and a lot of control over disease, that picture has changed, and now lots of children don't die in their first 5 to 10 years. So the whole way of being in the world is shifting, but what children are not getting is an awareness of death. And so if we don't get it as children, it sort of distorts from then on. And it's sort of also a bit like sex. If we don't get a proper introduction and healthy education about sex, then we have to fumble our way through it, which is generally what's happening to most people. And really, it's part of our behaviour as adults to have those feelings and that way. And so really from the very beginning now, instead of teaching children things that are very life skills that are very valuable to them and will enhance the way they approach life, we're teaching them a curriculum of things that really are absolutely outdated now, the way technology is moving, the way our mainstream everything is moving. A lot of those the school curriculum is not catching up because the people in charge are out of touch with what I think is needed on that baseline. And none of this is new for anybody listening, I'm sure. But because my approach, death is my teacher, and so I'm speaking from that place. So what I see is that if we took a more broader, respectful approach to death, and it's sort of like even now when people get sick, they won't acknowledge that death may be an outcome. They do not want to put that in their picture. And generally what I'm trying to say to people is what you said, just set a place for death at the table. You don't have to feed it, but it's certainly one of the options that may be, because it's there all the time. And no one wants to, they might joke about it, but really in that time, because it doesn't take up a lot of energy then. If you just let it be there, you don't have to put a lot of energy into resistance, because that is consuming your capacity and energy to deal with the situation. So if you just think, yep, and I might die. Okay, now I'm going to look at everything else, at what options I have around the condition that I'm in. And so people of my age don't get to be this age without experiencing a regular amount of death and dying. And so we know that's where we're heading, and then it's what we want to do with that time we have left. And part of that could be to contribute back into the community, but also to start to bring a death awareness, a healthier death awareness into community and culture, instead of trying to close it down. And one of the simple ways of doing that is in a lot of aged care facilities now. When someone dies, they distract all the other residents who may have lived with that person from anywhere from a few months to years, and then they take them out quietly, secretly. The funeral director comes in, takes them out, and they're gone. They just disappear. And in some more enlightened or kinder aged care facilities right now, what they're doing is allowing all the residents to come out and wave goodbye to that person's body as it is taken away, which just seems like a very normal, humane approach to it. But for some people think that is a revolutionary approach to accepting death in an aged care facility. And so it's about broadening and accepting death as the end goal. What do we want to do with that time that we have left? How do we want to use that wisely? And in the last few weeks, I've spoken to several people who are dealing with parents who want to end their lives, not because they're sick, but because they're tired and because they've had enough, and they don't want to deteriorate any further. They want to do something, and because we don't have a legalized assisted dying in this state, there's a lot of fear and a lot of control around that. So people are having to look at how to do that the best way they can within a legal system, but it's their right to die, and they can choose a range of options, either that are dramatic, which would be termed suicide, when really they're just ending their lives, or choosing to kill themselves because they feel their life is complete. They don't want to deteriorate beyond that point. So that would be a much healthier approach. And in other countries, that approach is there for people, whereas we've still got, again, an out-of-touch, religious-dominated approach to assisted dying, or allowing people to die at a time they choose.
Yeah, I mean, that's so strong, that aspect. And is it true that in Victoria you can now...
Yeah, they've just brought in assisted dying.
They've just brought it in, yeah. But is that the only state in Australia at the moment?
As far as I know.
Yeah. I mean, all these aspects that face, first of all, everybody, but especially once you do reach that last third part of, of your life, the reaching to elderhood, it's always kind of in the near future, and having it as the end goal really can change your perspective versus trying to avoid it or not think about it and just continue to live as if everything is the same. But even having it as from a very young age is the possibility that it might happen. And I think about myself when you're talking. I know I've always thought about it. It's like I could die at any point, you know, from lots of different things. And it kind of sits in my awareness there. And so when I say goodbye to my kids in the morning, I sometimes think about that, you know. We may not see each other again. And it's not in a very dramatic way. It's more like I better give this hug everything I have and be really present with them in this moment. And having those thoughts around are so helpful in terms of using your everyday time at any age, but particularly, and how striking that is what you were saying before about removing people secretly when they die from, you know, it's like we're trying to deny it till the very last minute. And really, it's so healthy and so healthy for everybody involved to be part of that process, and how weird it is not to say goodbye to somebody that was living with you for a few years.
Yeah, but it's also a protectionist approach by the system, which also
But is it really
applies to
protecting
birth.
us or making us more removed from ourselves and our communities in a really detrimental way to ourselves, that when it comes time for us to die, that we have to, yet another thing to deal with without being prepared, like childbirth, like, you know, like motherhood, like all of these phases of our life, without having any preparation or any support or anything to look to say, oh yeah, that happened to Mary last week, or that, you know.
And there is this, you know, there is a general feeling that, you know, we have to protect each other from something. So, you know, doctors are protecting people, not patients, but people, from a whole lot of information, or they think they know best, and that happens in birth, it happens in death, it happens generally in between. And, you know, parents do it with children around death. So one of the most common questions I used to get asked when I started this work here was, you know, and what do you think about the children? How should we tell the children? Should we let them come to the funeral? And I just think, like anything, you tell children the truth according to their age and their capacity to understand, and that's a continuing conversation as they age, and then they can understand more and they ask those questions. Then you answer those truthfully. And that's what I see a lot of families where someone has died and those adults have treated those children with the respect they deserve. And just recently I was involved with a family here where the mother was dying, and, you know, everybody's concern is the children. But if you lie to the children, it sets something up from the very beginning that is not a good lesson for them. Whereas if they get the truth and they talk with respect, children are very capable with death because they don't understand really forever or the whole implication of that. They will take it in at the level they can, and that is an ongoing journey for them. But especially if they are going to be affected by it, if it's their parent or a sibling, then they have absolutely the right to be told the truth, because kids will know, they'll sense something's happening. And the other thing around that is, you know, kids are very egocentric because that's what they're learning to be in the world, is their place in a bigger community, but everything is coming from them. And often when a parent is ill and then is dying, then if you don't tell the children the truth, because what you want to avoid is the children feeling responsible for that in some way, that it's something they've done. And especially when you've got kids who might think, oh, you know, I'm going to pray to something, if they have something they can pray to. You know, if you let mummy live, I will be a good girl, or I will be a good boy, or whatever. And so, of course, there's no way they can control that situation. It's not dependent on their behaviour. And so then if mummy does die, then they don't need to feel responsible that it was because they weren't good enough. So, and these are sort of, there are a whole lot of obscure things that children might feel that they're contributing towards that, something very small, that we as adults, you would, you know, dissolve immediately if the children told you that there's nothing you can do about it. It's a bigger picture. It's out of our hands. There's nothing I can do about it, even as the other parent. And to let them really not take any responsibility for that. Whereas if you don't tell them the truth, they'll be sensing that something is wrong. They're sensitive to the adult's behaviour, and they know there's a secret, and so often they'll turn it back to their awareness, their individual awareness. So it's things that we can't even imagine that children might pick up on. And we all know that from when we were kids, that we thought we might have contributed to something, whereas really it's a much bigger picture. So to avoid that happening is crucial for children involved in their family situation. And with grandparents, the kids aren't likely to take that on because they're old, and so that's an easier situation. But if it is a parent in particular, then you really want to be telling those children the truth.
Yes. It's so relevant, and it speaks to their capacity as well to, like you said, they're taking it in at the level of where they're at, and there is an innate intelligence at every age, at every being, and an understanding to that capacity, and we have to trust that, and if they have more questions, we can help with more answers and more information. And I absolutely agree with you. Every word on that. I think it's so relevant, and it's sad when we don't give children, we don't respect them, we don't give them their rightful. They do have a right, they deserve to know. They have a right to know what's happening in their own family, to their own loved ones that they care so deeply about and share a life with. It makes so much sense, yeah.
Yeah, and part of what I'm trying to do and have always done is whoever's sitting at that kitchen table or whoever's sitting around that bedside, whether they're physically there or not, because sometimes the children are out playing or with other families, is imagine that I am each person and what I would want to be told, or how I would want to be treated if I was a 5-year-old, if I was a 13-year-old, if I was a 20-year-old. And that has been a really great way to approach that work, and to try to get others to see, also to put themselves in that position, and to think, it's the classic, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. But people are very well intentioned in trying to protect the children, but it doesn't protect them, it deceives them. And then it's it's much more complex and harder to undo. And there are lots of adults my age who will, maybe listening now, have had a similar experience when they were children, where they weren't told the truth. They weren't allowed to see that person. That person never was mentioned again in that household. They never were allowed to go to the funeral because they were under 13. Or they don't know the full circumstances of the death, that someone killed themselves, or someone was murdered, or someone was involved in some situation where the family kept a secret because it was socially unacceptable, or they thought it was best, or they thought that it would be easier for the children. But when you find those things out, if you're lucky, you find those things out later, the truth, and it can be very damaging, because everything that you thought was the truth or the foundations of what your life is based on are not solid. They're in fact fake, or they're untrue, and that can be really disturbing and distressing for people who are in their 40s or 50s to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we've been talking about in general, about elderhood and about death and about separating each phase of our life and doing it all kind of in a silo situation. It's not helpful not to live a truthful, connected life. It's not helping us that we remove people to give birth, because then women never see what it's... Some women arrive at birth never having held a baby in their whole life. They're 28, 29, 30, 32, 34. They've never touched a baby before. In what kind of mental health reality do we think that that's healthy? And the same with death. How can we be removed, especially if it's something in our family or an illness, or everything needs to be integrated rather than separated. And and siloed off, and it's a wider conversation about how we are in this society. But it's wonderful to see that that's your practice, is through connecting for the last 25, 30 years that you've been doing this work, that through connecting the community to death, you're doing it not just for the families and the immediate community. It's something that everyone is aware of in this community, or a lot of people are aware of in this community, and they know to consider these aspects in their life because of the work that you're doing. It's having a wider imprint throughout, and yeah.
And recently, many of us were at the funeral for Jane Fullerton, Simon Richardson's wife and the mother of the children.
The mayor of Byron Bay,
yeah,
for those not knowing.
Who recently died after with cancer. And the children were there, and there were many children. There were probably about 60 or 70 children. And that ceremony was an hour and a half. It was a very beautiful and heartfelt and entertaining and rich and real ceremony for everyone that was there. It was probably about 300 or 400 people. But what was so noticeable was that the children that were there sat through the whole ceremony and were paying attention so much. It was so unusual that at the end of it, when I was closing that ceremony, I honoured the people who were standing because they'd come late and all the chairs were taken. But I also really wanted to honour the children. And as I said, I really want to honour all the children because they've been so quiet. The whole, all the people spontaneously burst into applause for the children because they also knew that the children had been exceptionally well behaved, or maybe they were always that well behaved, I don't know, but they had sat still, and there was something so beautiful in it because those children that were there had all been treated with respect by their parents. They knew what was happening before they got there, and then they were paying attention to their capacity, to who was speaking, what they were saying, who was playing or singing. And it was just it was a magnificent funeral for many reasons, for the obvious reasons, but also for the subtle reasons. And all of those parents and all of those children would be having ongoing conversations with their children. But what an incredible introduction for them to loss, to the death of parents, to knowing that their friends are motherless, and they won't be the only children there, because I know from doing the Day of the Dead ceremony once a year that often children will come there and honour their parents who have died. So it's not as rare as we think, especially now because we're in an epidemic of cancer and other diseases. And so we really have to get with the program to be real and respectful to children, to everyone about that. And it's everybody's right whether they want to discuss their own death or not. But when it involves children, I think we all have a community responsibility to try and be honest with them.
I am Annalee Atia. This is the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show, and we're talking with Zenith Virago today about death and weaving this very relevant and important information throughout every phase of our life, and as a community, the responsibility that we have for us, to ourselves and to others around us, to continue to acknowledge and have that in our awareness, that's just a natural and an eventual part of life that is so relevant to understand and know and be a part of as you're moving through life. And we talked a lot about children in the last segment. All of these insights are through experience and understanding and a lived experience in your own life as well. And yeah, I just find it really fascinating and how important that is at this phase of elderhood to be aware of that's where you're at, and how important it is to share that with the rest of us.
Yeah, and I think there are lots of people in our community who don't have children and don't have grandchildren, and sometimes they're connected to other people's children, but sometimes they're not connected to children at all. It's become more and more, and I think this area in particular has a lot of it has disproportionate everything. It's not like a regular old community, but it's a fabulous community. And what I also see is that whether you have children or not, that as we are aging, we really need to own that. And we've got a culture that says it wants to be young. So I know for the last, many years, at least 10, when I say, now I'm old, and then whatever I want to say, and people continually interrupt that by saying, you're not old. And I say, I am old. I've lived a long time, and I could die tomorrow. I could die today even. And I want to have experienced all those stages of my life. And so I do feel that. I feel now I'm old. My body's aging. It's old. It's not capable of what it was. It doesn't matter how I feel on the inside. I want to have some respect for a long life lived, and lots of learning in that, and lots of teaching, and lots of sharing, and lots of joy and sadness, and a whole mixed bag of things. And so I see it as my place in this community, personally and professionally, to really be real as I can about any situation that I find myself in any conversation that I'm in. I cannot pretend. I cannot, be stupid about things. So I know that death is lurking everywhere. And I see, because I'm having those conversations with everyone, and especially people who have a diagnosis, that are hoping that everything will be fine, but you do have to set a place for it. We all have to set a place for it, whether we're ill or not, that death can come at any time. And if we embrace that, a bit like what you're saying with your children when you say goodbye to them, just that the possibility of that is there all the time. It does the opposite, actually, because people think it'll make them morbid or depressed, or a range of reactions like that. But actually, it totally enriches life. And I don't know anybody who works with death that doesn't have a greater appreciation of life, because we know it better than others. And so for me, every day I'm real in all my interactions, in case they are the last, but also in a way that opens life to what it is, which is a transient thing. It's an unknown. And there's a Buddhist saying that, death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, and that's absolutely true. And so we really want to, if we have 2 minutes on the side of the road, or we're with someone where we come across an accident, and then, you really want to be present to that. And we want to be present to our own lives, to those people that are important to us, to people that we come across that aren't important to us, but we're interacting with. And to try and be, a better person for knowing that life is absolutely a transitory existence. And the longer we live, the more we learn, and the more benefit to others we can be with the courage that we've practiced, with the lessons that we've learned, with the wisdom we've gained, with the absolute appreciation that we've got to live a long time, and see ourselves through all those different stages of a life, whether we have children or not. That life is entwined with the people around us, but also as part of a community. And we have some incredible elders, in this community of Byron Shire, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and our lives are woven together. It's beautiful.
That's so beautiful. We're at the end of this show so quickly. Zena, thank you for coming on the show and chatting about such beautiful things and important things, and that remind us how beautiful and important life is, and how much we can be a part of it in every moment. Thank you, everybody that's listening. We'll be back with you next week with more inspiration and information about all topics to do with pregnancy, birth and beyond. You can find us on iTunes. Also, you can head to our website, pbbmedia.org, for lots more like this, and we'll catch you next time.
Find out more about Zenith Virago's work at naturaldeathcarecenter.org.
Tune in to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Hear from local and international families and experts on all things maternity, parenting, community and women's well-being. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. Tune in next week for more information and inspiration, bringing us full circle. You can find our show on iTunes, Spreaker, the usual social media under Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, and our website at pbbmedia.org.